Republicans didn't do so well. But we like to think that we kind of paved the Republican Revolution in Colorado in some way. But so I'm going to talk a little bit today about some things related to politics, not in like what candidate should we vote for, but more the process of politics and how that works. When I got to Doha, Qatar, people always ask me the last couple of days, how do you say it? It's really however you want to say it. The locals say it Qatar, but they say it with a guttural sound that we as Americans can't make. So Qatar is about as close as you can get. So when I got there, I got a call one day from Al Jazeera, the television station. Now there's Al Jazeera Arabic and there's Al Jazeera English. In fact, many cable stations now carry Al Jazeera English. And so since I was the only American political scientist in the country, they asked me if they'd come over and do political commentary. And so for a number of years, I don't know how many times I was appeared on the air. It was always 12 noon there, so 4 in the morning here, so nobody in the U.S. ever saw it. But that was, to me, I learned a lot from that experience. They never once told me what to think. I remember one of my favorite stories was before I think it was the 2008 election. Barack Obama had just won the nomination, and a hard-fought nomination, and he won it. And they asked me, they said, Dr. Kent, what's Barack Obama going to do now that he's won the nomination? And I said, well, he's going to become a lot more like the Republicans in his foreign policy. And I could see at the back that the producer was like, get this guy off there, he's crazy. So they cut the interview. So I went home and I turned on TV, and Barack Obama was talking to AIPAC, which is the Jewish lobby group, and he was so far to the right of George Bush in his foreign policy, what he was saying to them. Then they called me back, and then they wanted to talk about it. So, but it was an amazing opportunity to, as a political scientist, to teach democracy to Arabs. A lot of our students were Arab, a lot were Pakistani, Indian. It was an amazing opportunity to work with those students. So, because Randy's plane was 2.5 hours late, they asked me if I would step in, and so what I did, I pulled out, when I was over there, almost every election cycle, they would ask me to kind of explain the U.S. election system. And I would, even when on TV, they would ask me to explain it, because the U.S. election system, especially for president, is actually quite unique. And so I pulled this out. So the data that you're going to see in here is from a previous election, but it's really the principles stay the same. And then what I would like for us to do is to have, rather than a lecture, have a forum. Talk about the processes. I spent almost 15 years in the electoral process, doing polls, doing campaigns, everywhere from we worked on presidential campaigns all the way down to city council. So it kind of span the gap. So I'd love to talk about politics and the practical aspects. I always tell students that when I teach, get involved in an election. Find somebody that you believe in. There's nothing more rewarding, more exciting than being involved in an election. It really is. And what's really interesting, students, is that you get involved in an election and you can rise to the top in a campaign overnight if you're willing to work hard, where you get responsibilities you would never have in the real world, I guess we would say. And so get involved in an election. It's really fun, and it really will change your life and give you a taste for politics. My girls will tell you that we laugh about it now. They're all of them are 17 and above, but there was times when we'd come home from somewhere and say, everybody get your walking shoes on, we're going to put door hangers on, and so they kind of grew up in politics, and you can be part of that also. So we're going to talk about understanding U.S. elections, and then let's have a forum. So let's jump in and we can talk questions, talk about the process, talk about what elections are for. I think a lot of times the elections we see are on TV, radio, and we see them from afar, and we don't really realize what they're trying to do to us in these elections. So we'll get to some of that. So the candidates in 2012 were Mitt Romney and Barack Obama. And I think sometimes we forget that the U.S. presidential election is really not one election, but it's 50 elections. It's 50 elections. Each state is having its own election, and depending on who wins that state, a certain amount of electoral college votes will go to those candidates. I was interested in, since we moved back to the Middle East over the summer, it's been hard for me to get excited about the election. Maybe I'll get more excited about it. But when they talk about, they'll say, well, Donald Trump has 26% support of the 26% of the electorate. Somebody else has 20% or whatever. That's really, they're talking about the whole U.S. But really that doesn't matter. Because what matters is, are they winning in each individual state, especially the important states, which we're going to see in a minute. So you really have to take that number and know that it's not really giving you the information you need. You need to know what's happening in each individual state to really know how a candidate's doing. If a Republican, if Donald Trump is doing well in New York, it doesn't really matter because he's not going to win New York. The Democrat's going to win New York. So if his total vote in the U.S. is affected by his numbers in New York, it's distorted. So really, the U.S. election is really 50 separate elections. And you guys probably know this, that Virginia has 13 electoral college votes, which is makes up of the number of senators plus the number of congressmen. Texas has 38. That's like that across every state. And so it does distort it a little bit. It's not the election is not actually fair in so many ways. Who gets the advantage in this electoral college system? Which states get an advantage? Yeah.
The bigger states.
Not the bigger states.
States with higher population.
No, not the states with higher population. Well, they get more. You're right. They get more electoral college votes. That's probably where you guys were going. But it's not proportional. Why? Because a state like Wyoming are those that would have very few congressmen, but everybody has 2 senators. And so Wyoming is actually proportionally has more influence than a big state proportionally, because everybody gets two senators. Whether you're New York gets 2 senators, Texas gets 2 senators, and Wyoming and Montana get 2 senators. So those smaller states proportionally have.
Thank you, Todd. And I wondered just a second, the top number of congressmen from Texas, you said that's 36?
Right.
And is that the state, you have it up there because it's the state with the greatest number?
No, I'll show you that in just a second. It's just I pulled that as an example, just so that you can kind of see it. And what's happened over the last 30 years is population decline up in the Northeast and filling out the South and the Southwest. So it's this move kind of this way. And so Texas, I think when I first got interested in politics, had 27, so, and then you see these states, especially a lot of the Rust Belt states, have lost numbers. And New York is continuing to lose its numbers. So their clout begins to decline because there's 435 members of Congress. Those 435 are distributed among the states by population. And that's every 10 years. And that's why we've seen an increasing contentiousness of the census. Do you count homeless people? Do you count transients? Do you count people in your president? There's all this talk about who do we count, because it affects how many congressmen you end up with, and ultimately affects the election in some way. Other thoughts? So you can see that all the states are not equal. And I can't remember if I have a slide in there about this, but we're going to see in a minute that all the states don't matter the same. Some are very large. And some states are, the outcome is already predetermined. What I mean by that, it's so Democrat or so Republican that the opposite party won't run any campaigns there. In fact, Oklahoma, every county went Republican in the last election. It's the only place in the nation that was this. So if you're a Democrat, running for president, you're probably not going to spend a lot of money in Oklahoma, even though it's not that big a state. So you find out that typically in the last probably 3 or 4 election cycles, about 16 states got almost all the ads. There were some states that no presidential ads were played in at all. So the election was going on, and you probably never saw much of it if you were not in one of those 16 states. Because either the Republicans or the Democrats were so far ahead in those states. So to win the election, a candidate must win enough states to get at least 270 electoral college votes. Here you can see the 6 states with the most votes: 55 in California, 38 in Texas, 29 in Florida. See Ohio and Illinois 2018, New York 29, and Pennsylvania 20. So those are the most states. And you see you need the number of electoral college votes you get to at least get to 270. And however you can do it. And so certainly the Democrats start off way ahead because of California. Historically, well, recently California has been taken by the Democrats. Texas has been a strong Republican state, but some of these other states, other than New York, like Ohio, Pennsylvania, and Florida, have been kind of on the balance, and that's why lots of money is spent in those states, because they're not only big states, but the difference between the two parties is very slim, and I would suppose that will continue. So it's a race to 270 electoral college votes, and it was a few election cycles ago, Texas and Florida almost equaled California, so then it was kind of a dead heat going into the rest of the states. But increasingly, Florida is kind of an issue, and I think Texas is going to become an issue in the future, mainly because of demographics. You have an increasing number of Hispanic voters who, as hard as the Republicans have tried, haven't been able to win them over, and they tend to vote Democrat. So we're seeing in Florida and Texas more strength among Democrats in the state, and so I think that'll continue. So we'll see what happens. Almost all states are winner take all. There are a couple states that aren't. I believe, I want to say Rhode Island and Nebraska they do it proportionally. So if you get 60% of the vote, you get 60% of the electoral college. Almost all the rest of the states. So 48 of the 50 states. So a candidate can win a state by a very small margin, but he or she gets all of the electoral college votes. So in the famous case, or most recently, is George Bush in 2000. He won the election with less total votes than Al Gore. So in the election, Al Gore had 48% of the vote, but in electoral college numbers, George Bush won. Some people say, well, that's unfair. The person who, and there's been a big push to say, let's get rid of the electoral college, just go straight vote. I think there's a problem, because I always, every time somebody says that, I always can show them that, like, New York would distort the election, because New York is one of the largest states population-wise, and it's so overwhelmingly Democrat that rather than being limited how many electoral college votes they can get currently, if you did a popular vote, they would have more influence than they should. Okay, so I'm not opposed to getting rid of the electoral college. It's our Constitution. My personal feeling is, don't mess with the Constitution, because then it opens the door to other further changes in the Constitution, which we don't want. So my feeling is, don't get on that bandwagon, or that's at least my opinion. Don't get on that bandwagon to get rid of the electoral college. It's funny if the electoral college is in your favor, like 2000 as a Republican consultant, then I love the electoral college. There's other years where it works against us and I hate it, but it's going to go back and forth. So don't fall prey to this idea that we need to change it.
Todd, were the founding fathers mindful of this very issue, or was it another issue that caused them to be so cautious and conceive of an electoral college?
Well, when they do it, and I'm not a really great political historian, but there was a big compromise. Virginia and New Jersey, I believe, and it was a big state, small state thing. So we had the number of voters within there was they split it into two different groups because the big states could get the members of Congress, and every state got two senators. Okay, so it was the big states and little states. It was a compromise to set up the system, and also you got to remember when the nation was founded, you didn't have an internet, or phones, we weren't communicating, so you sent your electoral college members from every state to a place, and then they actually elected the president. You know what I mean? So it was a different world back then. And some people argue, yeah, it's such a different world. We need to scrap this system and move on to, that we really should be voting on the internet at home. But if you've ever been hacked, you know that that's a bad idea. But I think there's something about getting up, going to the polls, voting that's good for the country. It means something. I know that as a consultant, if there was areas of town that we were going to, or areas of the state that we were going to lose, we always hope for rain or snow or sleet, to keep people at home. But I think there's something valuable about that. But I think we're going to see push to say, we can have almost 100% turnout if we just let people vote on the internet. But I think we can't control it. I don't believe. So, almost all states are winner take all, and so if the Republican wins Texas by a big margin, still only get the 38 electoral college votes for that state, no more, whether he wins big or small. You remember when George Bush won in Florida, I think the final tally was he won by 150 votes when they finally finished, but yet he got all the electoral college votes, 29 or something like that, which gave him the election in 2000. So it's and I think the Florida election in 2000, they always say that your vote doesn't matter. In fact, political scientists say that the opportunity cost of voting is so high that why would you ever vote? But really, in Florida, it did matter. In fact, one vote in a couple neighborhoods actually changed the whole election, and so it does matter. But I think it's as citizens, I think we need to vote. Most states lean Republican or Democrat. I remember I said all but 16, 12 to 16, depending on the election year. And a lot of this is changing. It's changing demographics. Right now, most of your governors, a majority of your governors are Republican, but demographics are changing within states. And I think we're going to see changes. In fact, states with lots of Hispanic voters, Hispanics have had bigger families. They're growing faster. There's more immigration. We're seeing a lot more push from the Democrats in those states. So this would have been October 1st of 2012. You can see that some of the key states were actually very close. Obama ended up winning the election fairly handily, but at least on October 1st, before the November election, the key states were pretty close. In fact, on October 1st, 42 of the 50 states leaned one way or another. Candidates spend their time and money on winning these swing states. Tremendous amount of money is spent polling those states, doing commercials for those states. It's very, very expensive. I know that in 19, well, I don't even want to venture a guess. As a consultant, I did some elections in California, and back then for a 30-second spot in Los Angeles was $5,000. Okay, so that was in the early 80s or mid 80s. My guess is now it's could be 5 times that much for 30 seconds. So you have to raise it. And so you remember, my boss and I, we were going to meet with Dan Quayle. You remember Dan Quayle was George H.W. Bush's vice president. And he was trying to decide if he was going to run for president. And he was in Houston, and we met with him, and he said, you know, for me to be a viable candidate, I personally have to raise $50,000 a day. $50,000 a day. Now, remember, election laws only allow you to take $2,000 from any one individual. So he was going to have to get, you know, 25 people a day to give him $2,000, or 50 people a day to give him $1,000. And you know, we could tell when we walked out there, we said he's not going to run, because he didn't like that process. It's a very hard process. And so when you're spending, you know, you're talking about $25,000 a commercial or something like that in Los Angeles, that money that you've raised goes really fast for a 30-second spot. And so what the candidates like to do is only spend it in the areas where they think that it'll make a difference. I spent most of my career in politics as a pollster. We did, you know, doing polls. In fact, candidates base their strategy on polls. I was telling the students today, we were having class, and I said there was some question of whether or not, you know, we can make decisions based on numbers. What do numbers mean? This type of thing. And I said, look, as a pollster, we would have 10 or 15 candidates that we were working for. We knew who was going to win and who was going to lose before the election, because we were doing polls so regularly. My boss, who was, you know, he was the big boss, he knew which campaign parties he wanted to go to, because you don't want to go to the losing campaigns, you want to go to the winning ones. But he would make his plane reservations because he knew who was going to win and going to lose. Very, very few times there were surprises. So the candidates, they do internal polls, so they know what's happening all the time. They know what they're going to win or lose, probably. And you can hear it in their language. You can hear it. You can see their travel schedule, what they feel like is happening. But they base their strategy on public opinion polls. This is the typical question we have for president. If the election for president of the United States were held today, would you vote for the Republican Mitt Romney or the Democrat Barack Obama? The first polls were done in the 1920s by Gallup, and it was actually all polls were done face to face. You know, they could hire people, they'd go face to face. But then we got into this problem where communities weren't homogeneous anymore. What I mean by that is they weren't like. So when you had more and more diversity in a community, whether it be income diversity or racial diversity or age diversity or something, the voters didn't think alike. So in the early days, you just go ask 10 people, and that whoever had the majority, that was it. But then they started realizing you have to do better. So polling is really an art and a science. It's very sophisticated. The problem with polling today is the cell phone. It used to be that we only called home phones, but half the people, especially young people, the millennials, they don't even have home phones. They only have a cell phone. And so then the problem in the U.S. is if you answer the call, there's a charge. Okay, and so people get mad if you're polling their phone. Also, I think you'll see more and more internet polling is they've gotten better methodology to make sure it's accurate. There's a big, you know, people always talk about, well, you can't trust those polls you hear on CNN and Fox and whatever, and we're going to look at that in just a second. The campaigns themselves know the truth, okay? And there's a big difference sometimes between like what Fox will do or CNN or Gallup or the New York Times, and it's all their assumptions they put in their methodology, and that makes a big difference. Is that biased? I don't know. We've gotten now where there's a lot of reporting on the quality of polling, and so people are embarrassed when their polls aren't any good anymore. You can see here, polls are conducted nationwide at each state. Rasmussen Daily Presidential Poll, this is September 30th, 2012. Had Romney at 46, Obama 48, other than undecided. So this was probably 6 weeks out from the election, and it was still very close. But again, if this is nationwide, remember, it doesn't really matter. It matters the mix between the states. Okay, so don't fall prey to that, because this is what they like to report in general. But it's really the mix between the states that matters to us. Polls are good indicators. This is the 2008 final poll before the election. So this is old data. Here's the actual result. McCain got 46, Obama 53. And you can see Rasmussen was almost right on the mark. Gallup a little bit off. Pew, interestingly enough, was really close. They're not considered a major pollster. But this is Gallup and CBS New York Times. Not bad, but not certainly not as good as Rasmussen. Rasmussen is Scott Rasmussen, a pollster, and you can go on his website, and he puts a lot of his polls up there. And if you want to know what's going on in the world, it's a very good way to kind of keep abreast of what's happening. As a Christian, as somebody that wants to understand politics from a Christian perspective, I want to know what our country thinks about abortion, what they think about marriage, about the family, and these types of things. And usually, Rasmussen and Gallup, you can go on their websites and you can find out. Some websites will even report by state, which is very interesting, because we've been involved in a cultural battle for a long time. It's only going to get worse, in my opinion. It's gonna be more out there. Any questions about? So polls are accurate. Done right, polls are very accurate, and most of the time there's a big incentive to get them right, especially the campaigns themselves. This is 2012, and as a consultant, we spend a lot of time thinking about what do people care about. Because if you can identify with if I can identify with each one of you that one issue that you really care about, and I can provide you information on that, I may be able to get you out to vote for my candidate. So it's that key issue. Most of it, and I think it's a problem among evangelicals that we tend to be more single issue voters than a lot. We tend to be, we like to be principled, which is a good thing, but I think we need to care about a broad list of things, and we do. So this is the CBS New York Times poll, September 8th, 2012. 1,170 registered voters, which puts you at a margin of error of about 3%, okay? What is the most important issue to you in deciding how you will vote for president this year? So they just threw it out there, open-ended. So people are going to respond off the top of their heads. Now, that's a problem. Pollsters will tell you that's a really big problem, because if you don't know anything, you just say something. It may not even matter to you, but you remember taxes. Oh, somebody said taxes. So you don't know if this is how good this is. But it's interesting. If you look at these issues in 2012, nobody was talking about foreign policy. How quick things change. In fact, I broke these out, and foreign policy wasn't a big part of this. This is just kind of random stuff. This is 2012. Now, my guess is this next year, foreign policy will matter a lot more because of what's happening. So if you go back to George H.W. Bush, he is finishing up his first term. Well, he's a year out. We had the Iraq War. His favorable numbers, they asked, do you think that President Bush you have a favorable, unfavorable opinion of how he's doing? His favorables got up to 85%. I mean, like 85% of the electorate said that George H.W. Bush was doing a good job. 6 months later, they're at like 30%, 35%. That wasn't that high, I wasn't that low, about 35, 40%. Because people quit thinking about foreign policy and international affairs and started thinking about the economy. You remember Bill Clinton said it's the economy, stupid. So the Clinton campaign was able to change the focus away from things that benefit the Republican, which is foreign policy, towards something that benefits the Democrat. And nothing's changed right now. Hillary Clinton is certainly coming out as the populist candidate. She's the one for the middle class and the working man. I mean, that's what she's going to do, and that's the Democratic strategy to do that. Now, what's going to be interesting is if we continue to have this problems with ISIS, with refugees, with terrorism. Can the Democrats overcome their disadvantage in that area? So we'll see. And I shared this article with the students today. If you go into First Things, which is it's actually a Catholic kind of news and commentary type publication. It's very good. The people that write for them are very smart. One of my colleagues writes an article, usually about politics, once a month or so. His name is James Rogers. And he wrote an article about why Republicans are so willing to support what he called kind of out of the box or crazy type candidates. I can't remember the term he used. Many of the students remember. But he basically said that over the last few elections, Republicans have promised one thing and done another. That when facing off with the Democrats, we give up. We say no new taxes. Next thing you know, we have new taxes. No new spending. Next thing you know, the budget deficit's gone up. That the Democrats always win. And so he's contending that Donald Trump and some of these other guys are doing well because of the past actions by Republicans. We'll see if he is correct in his assessment. So one thing you should look for this year is what do people think the most important issue is? If it's foreign policy issues, it's good for the Republicans. If it's economic issues, typically Democrats do better, especially on as you go down the lower races, they do better. So what I want to do is take a few minutes here, and I want to let you look at some campaign commercials throughout history. It's not only informative, but I think it's kind of fun to see how things have changed. And when we finish, we can spend some time kind of talking about the process of elections, the candidates, where we are today, and we can give our own assessment. So let me just take I pulled out about, I don't know, 5 or 6 that I think are interesting. This is 1952. Remember Eisenhower, what was his job?
General.
He was a general. He was a winning general. You know what I mean? So you can see the strategy of his people was, we just have to mention Ike's name a lot because he is so popular that everybody will vote for him. Let's see what.
Ike for president, Ike for president, Ike for president, Ike for president. You like Ike, I like Ike, everybody likes Ike for president. Hang out the banner, beat the drum, we'll take Ike to Washington. We don't want John or Dee or Harry, let's do the big job right. Let's get in step with the guy that's left, get in step with Ike. You like Ike, I like Ike, everybody likes Ike for president. Hang out the banner, beat the drum, we'll take Ike to Washington. We got to get where we are going, travel day and night for president. And a lake go the other way, we'll all go with Ike. You like Ike, I like Ike, everybody likes Ike for president. Hang up the banner, beat the drum, we'll take Ike to Washington. We'll take Ike to Washington.
Now is the time for all good Americans to come to the aid of their country. Vote for Eisenhower.
All good Americans come to the aid of their country, vote Eisenhower. I think that's funny. You know, this was 1952, and the first presidential debate on TV. Does anybody know what year it was? 1960. Nixon and Kennedy, and it was interesting. The people who saw it on TV said it was obvious that Kennedy had won the debate. The people who heard it only on the radio said it was obvious that Nixon won the debate. And it really began to show you how the way a candidate looks. And what happened because they had these really strong lights in there, Nixon was sweating. So the whole debate, he was wiping the sweat off his face, where Kennedy kind of looked cool and collective. And just the visual said Kennedy won. Whereas when you didn't see the visual, it was Nixon won. Okay, that was the Republican.
knows what to do when he gets to be the prez. I love the governor of Illinois. He is the God that brings the double peace and joy. When Illinois, the GOP double-crossed, he is the one who told all the crooks get lost. Adley, love you madly, and what you did for your own great state, you're gonna do for the rest of the 48. Didn't know much about him before he came, but now my heart's a ballot that bears his name. 'Cause listen to what he has to say. I know that on election day we're gonna choose the God that we love. He is the God nobody can shove. We'll make the God the president of the you, the me and the USA.
Different strategies. One, we're just going to tell this great general, tell people to go vote for him. Others, I suppose, I don't know who that was. I suppose it was a movie star of the time. Okay, this is 64. No, so in '64 we had Johnson and Goldwater, and so Johnson, his Great Society programs and good Texan, by the way. Against Goldwater, and Goldwater, he was trying to paint Goldwater as the crazy, right-wing radical, and so this is the most famous commercial of all time, and it only played one time, on TV one time, but yet we're still talking about it. Most would say it was the most effective commercial of all time. So watch.
These are the stakes. To make a world in which all of God's children can live, or to go into the dark. We must either love each other, or we must die.
Vote for President Johnson on November 3rd. The stakes are too high for you to stay home.
Wow. One time. There's some prominent they're political psychologists, actually. They have psychology and political science degrees, and they research the psychology of politics, and they will tell you the only way you can get a person to change their mind is through raising the level of uncertainty. So if I say I'm for candidate A, and you can create such uncertainty about that candidate, I might change my mind. Very rarely, but I might. That's why you see negative ads are so big, because they're the one thing that can accomplish what you want. Okay, and then so negative ads are here to stay. That only played one time. I worked when I was getting my PhD. I did local races, and my wife sitting back here, Brenda, she hated local races because the people that you were campaigning against, you saw them at the grocery store and everywhere you went. So it was tough. We created an ad, and we had a little 10-year-old girl do the voiceover, and I guess it was so mean. The radio station, our friends at the radio station called and said, "You guys got to take this off the air." And we played it about 3 times, and we went in. But it was this little girl, about 10 years old, saying that this our opponent needed a timeout, and it was the only time that I've ever created an ad where people still talked about it. They went.
It wasn't mean.
It wasn't me.
No.
It was, but it was.
Truthful.
It was truthful. All right, we'll move on from there. So it's widely considered that that Ronald Reagan, coming out of Hollywood, he started a whole new world of media and politics. I mean, because he didn't get the old political consultant to make his ad. He brought in the Hollywood people. Much better. They were much more sophisticated. Changed everything in politics. Instead of paying $1,000 for somebody to come out and shoot something and put it together, you're now looking at spots that cost $1 million. Totally changed everything. So this next ad is it was at the end of the '84 campaign. If you remember, Ronald Reagan won all the states. He won 49 of the 50 states. He even won Mondale State. I can't remember if he lost. I don't even know which state he lost. I can't remember. But and you know what he was running on is, look, 4 years ago, high inflation, high taxes, everything was bad. The nation was gloomy. But look where we are today. Do we want to go back? And this is considered one of the best ads of all time, and it's kind of a feel-good ad. See what you think.
It's morning again in America. Today, more men and women will go to work than ever before in our country's history. With interest rates at about half the record highs of 1980, nearly 2,000 families today will buy new homes, more than at any time in the past 4 years. This afternoon, 6,500 young men and women will be married. And with inflation at less than half of what it was just 4 years ago, they can look forward with confidence to the future. It's morning again in America. And under the leadership of President Reagan, our country is prouder and stronger and better. Why would we ever want to return to where we were less than 4 short years ago?
That pretty much eliminated Jimmy Carter from the race. Remember that ad, and then remember this next ad I'm going to show you for Reagan, because when we go forward, I guess, 20 years, and you see George W. Bush running almost identical ads. I don't know if it was similar type people, or if they just figured, hey, they worked 20 years ago, they're going to work today. So when Ronald Reagan was running for president again, who was our big adversary? Russia, the Soviet Union, the bear. Okay, watch.
There is a bear in the woods. For some people, the bear is easy to see. Others don't see it at all. Some people say the bear is tame. Others say it's vicious and dangerous. Since no one can really be sure who's right, isn't it smart to be as strong as the bear? If there is a bear.
If you remember, one of the big issues in the campaign was this massive buildup in defense spending of Reagan. And probably, many think that probably broke the Soviet Union, because they, as this arms race increased, they tried to keep up and eventually ran out of money. And so his way is making sure that people understood what he was trying to do. Okay, this is 2004. George W. Bush and John Kerry. This is using humor to give a mean message. That's the wrong one. Here we go. Sorry about that.
George W. Bush and I approve this message. Few votes in Congress are as important as funding our troops at war. Though John Kerry voted in October 2002 for military action in Iraq, he later voted against funding our soldiers.
Mr. Kerry.
No. Body armor and higher combat pay for our troops.
Mr. Kerry.
No. Better health care for reservists.
Oh, here we go.
No. And what does...
Sorry about that.
I'm George W. Bush, and I approve this message. In which direction would John Kerry lead? Kerry voted for the Iraq War, opposed it, supported it, and now opposes it again. He bragged about voting for the $87 billion to support our troops before he voted against it. He voted for education reform and now opposes it. He claims he's against increasing Medicare premiums, but voted 5 times to do so. John Kerry, whichever way the wind blows.
So when you're delivering a mean message in politics, use humor, but it has to be done right, or humor can backfire on you. But also, female voices are better, and older voices. We trust an older voice. Older voices are never going to lie to you. We had when you make an ad, you typically, there's places all over the country, and you listen to the voices, and you say, okay, I want that voice. So you send them the ad, and then they bring her or him into the station, and they record it, and then they send you the tape, and you put it on your stuff. And there was a lady named Libby, and Libby she had the greatest voice I've ever seen. This is out of Arkansas. She was, I think, 65, but it was this clear voice, and when Libby spoke, she was telling the truth all the time. You know, the problem is you always wanted to overuse Libby because she was the best. Okay, remember I was, let me see if I can find that. Oh yeah. So remember the bears.
In an increasingly dangerous world, even after the first terrorist attack on America, John Kerry and the liberals in Congress voted to slash America's intelligence operations by $6 billion. Cuts so deep they would have weakened America's defenses. And weakness attracts those who are waiting to do America harm.
I'm George W. Bush, and I approve this message.
So Reagan used the bears, the Soviet Union. George W. Bush's campaign used the wolves as the terrorist. I thought it was interesting that it's almost the same commercial. 20 years later, kind of a little bit different. Remember the feel good. It's Morning in America. So this is called Whatever It Takes. This is very interesting because I always show this in my classes. I told you it was full of Arab students, and I'd watch their reaction because they had mixed feelings about George W. Bush. You know, they didn't like the fact that he went into Iraq. They didn't really care that he went into Afghanistan. They didn't consider that part of their world. But it was interesting to watch their faces, and you know, when I watch this, tears almost come to my eyes every time because it's so meaningful.
These 4 years have brought moments I could not foresee and will not forget. I've learned firsthand that ordering Americans into battle is the hardest decision, even when it is right. I've returned the salute of wounded soldiers who say they were just doing their job. I've held the children of the fallen who are told their dad or mom is a hero, but would rather just have their mom or dad. I've met with the parents and wives and husbands who have received a folded flag. And in those military families, I have seen the character of a great nation. Because of your service and sacrifice, we are defeating the terrorists where they live and plan, and you're making America safer. I will never relent in defending America, whatever it takes. I'm George W. Bush, and I approve this message.
So in the 2000 election, George Bush won by 150 votes. He actually lost he won by 150 in Florida. He actually lost the election in popular vote. 4 years later, he won by 4.5 million votes. And Karl Rove, who is from Texas, a consultant, I used to work with him when he was a nobody, and now then he worked for Bush. He helped Bush get elected twice. He said the difference between 2000 and 2004 was the evangelical vote, getting them out to vote. It's church people actually came out and voted instead of stayed home. It was a huge difference. But let me ask you a question. What was the goal of this ad? What do you think the goal was? Yeah.
To hit on the emotion of the person who's watching.
Certainly emotion. I mean, emotion wins. What else? you think the goal of the other producers?
Kind of implying that Democrats are the ones who are gonna be weak on this matter, and Republicans will be.
Okay, certainly plays to Republican strength, okay. Yeah, I agree with that. What else?
Inspire patriotism and then link that to this candidate.
Yeah,
Say that
so
this-
it's patriotism toward, and link it to Bush. What else? You know, if you, especially you young people, this is way before your time, but, you know, Kerry was hitting on Bush that, you know, all we are is about defense, and we're attacking, we're going into Iraq, we've got all these wars, whatever. I don't know this to be true. It seems to me like they were trying to humanize him, show the humanity of George W. Bush, because everybody knew, and I think the key issue in 2004 was our national security. So Bush was going to win that easy, but to make him seem like a human, they're talking about it's not easy to send people into war. I thought it was very effective, and you know, Bush, like Reagan, very, very good ads. So let's finish up here now with just a couple modern ads from. We'll look at one of Obama, maybe one from Romney. So we'll go to 2012. So we started with 1952. Now we're up to 2012. You can see the difference. Now, it's probably through polling or through research, but the Obama people like to put Obama on the screen. They like to. I guess they think that he really sells, and he must because he's been elected twice. So let's take a look at.
Those ads, taking my words about small business out of context, they're flat out wrong. Of course Americans build their own businesses. Every day, hardworking people sacrifice to meet a payroll, create jobs, and make our economy run. And what I said was that we need to stand behind them, as America always has, by investing in education and training, roads and bridges, research and technology. I'm Barack Obama, and I prove this message because I believe we're all in this together.
No matter what you think about Barack Obama, the guy is a really good communicator. In fact, when I would, usually when he was going to speak at the United Nations or the State of the Union, they would bring me in, and I would, after it was over, we'd do commentary on the speech. And and almost always he hits home runs. He does. He's just good. If I was his consultant, I think I'd probably stick him on there. So let's see if we can find a good Romney. I don't know. I can't remember.
Absolute lies. That's what these coal miners had to say about Barack Obama's claim that they were forced to attend a campaign rally for Mitt Romney.
There is a war on coal, and we do want to protect our jobs.
In a letter, the miners make it clear no one was forced to attend the rally, no attendance records were taken, and there were no penalties for not attending.
Why would you lie about the 500 working miners who have signed this letter?
One more. Let's see if there's a.
When the cameras rolled, a performance began. But the problem is, that's all it was.
I don't have a $5 trillion tax cut.
He's got a tax cut that if you just implemented it as written would cost $5 trillion.
I will not reduce the taxes paid by high-income Americans.
Is that actually true? No. His plan actually would dramatically decrease the tax burden on the wealthy in this country.
Pre-existing conditions are covered under my plan.
I have to rate that mostly fiction.
Why was Romney so dishonest about his plan? His massive new tax cut for millionaires means higher taxes on the middle class. And AARP says Romney's plan undermines Medicare by turning it into a voucher. We have real challenges to meet. Children to educate, a middle class to rebuild. America needs a president with character, not a politician who just plays one.
I love those ads. I guess maybe some of you are sports junkies and like to watch ESPN over and over. I like to watch ads, and you can go to livingroomcandidate.org, and all these ads are on there from 1952 to the present. So, any comment, any questions, comments, any thoughts about the process of electoral politics, how we should think about it, what it means? Anybody? So I hope you'll get involved. We have find a candidate, get behind them, and I'll tell you one story, especially for these students. Brenda and I were at Summit Ministries, which is in Colorado. This was 1988, the summer of '88, and I'd sent a letter to my U.S. congressman saying I was in grad school. I was getting a master's, and I did say I would like to do an internship at his office or something. So we're at the summit. I'm teaching politics and economics to the students. And get a call from his office. And they said, we have this campaign position that the congressman has taken on 30 counties in Texas, at Dallas, Houston, Austin. I mean, these are the big part of Texas, and we need somebody to come down there and head it up for us. I said, that sounds fantastic. And she goes, yeah, but we only pay $700 a month. And I was like, well, I got a wife and a mortgage and all this. And so we talked about it, we prayed about it, and so we decided to do it. So we went down there, and I worked for 3 months. My boss was Congressman Joe Barton, but we were working for the Bush campaign. And the reason I tell that story to you students is I was putting up signs, I was making calls. You just did everything. You weren't important. You were a body that was willing to do labor. But I met everybody that I worked with in politics for the next 15 years. I met during that 3 months. That changed my whole life, because you meet these people. You're up at 2 in the morning with them. You're traveling with them. You know, one time we were campaigning for George H.W. Bush, President 41. And so it was George Bush, the future president, Congressman Barton, and our pilot. So we fly to different cities, we go out, and they speak, and the crowds cheer, and we get back on the plane. So finally we went and landed at Hillsborough Airport, right in the middle between Dallas and Waco. And plane landed, limousine pulled up and got George W. Bush, the congressman's people got him. The pilot says, well, I'm going home. And so I'm stuck there. They didn't care. So I had to call Brenda. She drove 2 hours to pick me up. But what happened was, by giving of your time, serving, being willing to serve, you meet people that really will change your whole life if you're involved if you're interested in politics. And I'm not saying that you have to be, but it's a great opportunity to do something neat. So thank you for your attendance, and certainly I think there's some refreshments out there, and certainly love to visit with you.
Thank you.